I don't know when it all started to slip, when what I thought was love became a slow, quiet erosion of myself. Some nights I tell myself it was the evening I first met Claire, the way she walked into that cafe with a confidence that outshone everyone else. She wasn't the most beautiful woman in the room, but she carried herself like she knew something the rest of us didn't, and maybe she did. Other times, I think it was later, after the second or third time we'd seen each other, when her laughter began to stitch itself into my chest in a way that hurt, because I already suspected she'd be dangerous for me. It's strange to admit how quickly we fall into the traps we think we're clever enough to avoid. I was in my mid-30s, bruised but not broken from past relationships, carrying the kind of cynicism that makes a man believe he can't be fooled again. And yet, Claire dismantled that wall with a glance. She seemed to know how to press the right words into me, how to catch me off guard. Our first few conversations felt like stolen pieces of something larger, like fragments of a story we were meant to continue together. The night we first kissed, I remember the world felt staged, as if someone had dimmed the lights around us just to highlight that moment. She leaned in without hesitation, her hand brushing my jaw, her lips carrying both urgency and restraint, as though she wanted me but also needed me to believe she could still walk away at any moment. I should have paid attention to that tension in her, the way she always seemed half present, half elsewhere, but I didn't. I mistook it for mystery instead of warning. In the months that followed, we became inseparable, at least on the surface. Dinners that stretched until midnight, weekends where we escaped the city just to breathe in the silence of unfamiliar places, mornings where she would rest her head on my chest as though I were the safest place she'd ever known. And maybe for a while I was. But love, I've learned, is never just about presence. It's about what's absent, what's unsaid, what's carefully hidden in the pauses. There were signs, there are always signs. The unexplained phone calls she would take in the kitchen, speaking in a voice low enough to force me to strain my ears. The times she'd suddenly cancel plans, claiming exhaustion or work deadlines. The way she'd disappear into her thoughts even as she sat across from me, her eyes dark and distant as though she were holding onto a truth that didn't belong to us. I saw all of it, and yet I chose blindness. Because the heart, when desperate for connection, will bury the evidence against itself. One evening, after nearly a year together, she invited me to her apartment for dinner. It was something she rarely did. We spent most of our nights at mine. Her place was immaculate, curated in a way that felt more like a showroom than a home. Minimalist furniture, books arranged by color rather than title, art that looked expensive but impersonal. Still, I tried to read it as her style rather than her shield. We cooked together, or rather, I cooked while she poured us wine and leaned against the counter, watching me with that same amused detachment she often wore. I remember her asking me if I ever kept secrets, if there were parts of myself I'd never share with anyone. The question came so casually, like a pebble tossed into still water, but the ripples it created lingered long after. Of course, I said, trying to play it light. Everyone does. The difference is whether the secret protects someone or destroys them. Her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, and in that brief slip I thought I saw the truth of her. But she quickly replaced it with laughter, crossing the room to kiss me as if to erase my suspicion. Still, the unease gnawed at me. That night while she slept, I wandered her apartment. Not to snoop, or so I told myself, but to understand. Her bookshelves, her framed photographs, though oddly there were very few of those. In her bedroom, only a single picture rested on the nightstand, her standing beside a man I didn't recognize, both of them smiling in a way that felt rehearsed. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The questions it raised were enough to keep me awake long after dawn. I should have left then, should have demanded answers while I still had the strength to walk away if they weren't what I wanted to hear. But I didn't. I stayed, convincing myself that whatever shadows lingered in her past, they had nothing to do with us. That was my first betrayal, not hers but mine against myself. Because deep down I knew, I always knew. It didn't take long before the cracks began to widen, though I tried everything to pretend they weren't there. Claire grew restless in ways that were hard to ignore. Her attention flickered like a candle in a draft. One day she would cling to me as though I were the only anchor she had in this world, and the next she'd pull away, retreating into silence, her phone clutched like it contained her entire identity. There was a night I still can't erase, no matter how much I try. I had stopped by her apartment unannounced, carrying a bottle of wine and the foolish hope of surprising her. When she opened the door, her expression was not delight but panic, just for an instant, quickly buried under a smile. I didn't press her then, but something inside me knew I had intruded on a moment I wasn't supposed to witness. Later, while she showered, her phone buzzed on the counter. I shouldn't have looked, I know that. But curiosity isn't always innocent. Sometimes it's survival disguised as weakness. The message was simple, almost cryptic. Tomorrow, same place. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. My chest tightened as though I'd been caught in a vice. I didn't confront her that night. I told myself I needed more, that a single message was not enough to accuse her of betrayal. But the seed was planted, and once suspicion roots itself, it grows like ivy, relentless and suffocating. The following week I told her I had to work late, when in truth I followed her. I felt pathetic, like a man playing detective in his own tragedy, but I couldn't stop myself. She walked with a purpose I had rarely seen in her, a sharpness to her movements that belonged to someone who didn't need me. She turned down streets I didn't know, finally stopping at a quiet restaurant far from our usual places. I watched from across the street as she slid into a booth where a man was already waiting. He was older, sharply dressed, the kind of man who radiated authority without needing to raise his voice. They didn't kiss, didn't touch, but there was an intimacy between them that was unmistakable. The way she leaned in, the way his hand briefly brushed hers on the table, it told me everything I had refused to believe. I wanted to storm in to demand an explanation, but I stayed frozen. Instead, I watched the entire dinner play out like a cruel theater staged for my humiliation. When they parted, there was no embrace, only a quiet nod, and she walked away as if nothing had happened, as if I didn't exist. That night when she came to my place, she was affectionate, almost desperate in her touch. It broke me more than her absence would have, because I knew that her tenderness was borrowed, a mask she wore to conceal the truth. I told myself I'd confront her the next day, but morning came, and she looked at me with those tired, vulnerable eyes, and I couldn't do it. Instead, I kissed her forehead and made her coffee, all while swallowing the bile of betrayal that had become my daily diet. Weeks turned into months, and I became a man split in two, the one who held her close, whispered promises, pretended our love was whole, and the one who carried the image of her with that man like a splinter under the skin. Every smile she gave me, every touch, felt contaminated by what I knew but refused to voice. Then came the night everything changed. She had fallen asleep on my couch, her head in my lap, when her phone buzzed again. I told myself not to look, but my hand betrayed me. This time the message was longer. He's starting to suspect. We need to be more careful. My blood ran cold. It was confirmation not just of betrayal but of conspiracy. They weren't casual, they were deliberate. And worse, I was the subject of their caution. I sat there for what felt like hours, my hand trembling as I held her phone, her breathing slow and steady against my leg. I wanted to shake her awake, to scream, to demand answers. But I didn't, because in that moment I understood something even more terrifying than her betrayal. I wasn't ready to lose her. It's a shameful thing to realize how much power another person has over you, to know that even armed with the truth, you'll choose the lie just to keep them near. I set the phone down, brushed her hair back from her face, and whispered her name as though I still believed in us. But the silence between us had changed. I had changed, and soon so would everything else. The following weeks unfolded like a slow, unbearable play in which I was both the audience and the fool. Every glance from Claire felt weighted with secrets, every laugh hollow, rehearsed. Yet I kept playing my role, her loyal companion, her safe place, while inside me, Suspicion carved deeper wounds. One evening she suggested we take a short trip out of town. "Just us," she said with that persuasive tilt of her smile. "We've both been tense lately. Let's get away." The irony nearly choked me, but I agreed. Some part of me wanted to believe, to cling to the fantasy that maybe it was all in my head, that she still loved me the way I loved her. We drove north to a lakeside cabin she claimed belonged to a distant cousin. The place was quaint, almost too perfect. Polished wood floors, wide windows overlooking the water, the kind of quiet that feels staged. I tried to relax, to enjoy her presence, but unease hung heavy. She was affectionate, yes, but it felt orchestrated, as though she were distracting me from something she couldn't admit. The second night while she slept, I wandered through the cabin. I opened drawers, cabinets, anything that might reveal who this cousin was. What I found instead stopped me cold. In the desk by the window lay a folder, thick with papers. At first, I thought it was nothing more than old bills. But when I pulled it open, photographs spilled onto the floor, photographs of me. Some were candid shots I recognized. Me leaving work, me sitting at a cafe, me unlocking my apartment door. Others, though, I had never seen, taken from angles that suggested long observation. My skin prickled as I sifted through them. They were all dated, organized, some going back nearly a year, before I had even met Claire. Heart pounding, I stuffed them back into the folder and shoved it into the drawer, careful not to wake her. My mind reeled, trying to connect the pieces. Claire's sudden appearance in my life, her intimacy, the man at the restaurant, the coded messages, none of it felt accidental anymore. The next morning I watched her make coffee, the light catching in her hair as if she were the embodiment of normalcy. I wanted to grab her shoulders, to shout, "What the hell is this? Who are you really?" But I didn't. I smiled weakly, took the cup from her hands and swallowed the bitter taste of silence. Later that day, she insisted we go for a walk around the lake. The path curved through dense trees, the air damp with the scent of pine. She held my hand, squeezing it now and then, her voice light as she spoke about meaningless things. I tried to listen, but all I could hear was the drum of my own heart and the question that had taken root in my chest. Was I her lover or her target? When we returned to the cabin, I excused myself under the pretense of needing air. My phone trembled in my hand as I scrolled through her number, tempted to call the mysterious man whose messages had pierced my peace. Instead, I did something I had never done before. I followed her lead and played a part. That evening while she cooked, I asked, "Do you ever think about the future, about us?" My voice cracked only slightly. She turned, smiled, and kissed me softly. "Of course I do. You're everything I've been searching for." The words should have comforted me, but instead they sounded rehearsed, a script she had memorized. And I realized then that I couldn't keep living in the dark. If I didn't confront her soon, I would lose what was left of my sanity. When she stepped into the shower that night, I returned to the desk. This time I opened the folder fully. Alongside the photographs there were documents, financial records, names, and addresses I didn't recognize. At the bottom lay a handwritten note. Phase 3, maintain emotional leverage until further instructions. I felt the blood drain from my body. Emotional leverage, that was me. I was the project, the objective. Whatever this was, Claire's love had never been free, it was a strategy. I heard the water stop, panic rising in my throat. I stuffed everything back, closed the drawer, and sat on the couch just as she emerged, hair damp, skin flushed. She smiled at me as though nothing in the world was wrong. I smiled back, and in that smile I sealed my own fate. I thought I knew what fear was, but true fear isn't the sudden jolt of a near car crash or the snap of a bone when you fall. True fear is slower, quieter. It's the kind that crawls into your veins, whispering that every breath you take is already mapped by someone else. That's what living with Claire became after the lake. I returned from that trip not as her lover, but as her shadow. My every word was measured, every glance weighed against what I now knew. I wanted to confront her, to scream, to demand answers, but I couldn't. There was danger in that folder, danger I couldn't yet define. Until I understood who was pulling the strings, I had to play along. And so I became an actor in my own life. I laughed at her jokes, traced my fingers along her skin, and murmured promises of forever. But inside I was watching, listening, recording each detail like a prisoner carving days into the wall. One night weeks later my patience cracked. She was on the phone in the kitchen, her back to me. I could only hear fragments of her voice, low and urgent. "Yes, I know, soon, no, he suspects nothing." The final phrase slammed into me like a blow. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stay still, pretending to read on the couch until she reappeared, smile stitched onto her face. I decided then I needed proof beyond the folder, beyond overheard whispers. If I confronted her too early, she'd deny it all and I'd be left the paranoid fool. So I started digging on my own. I checked the numbers she dialed, traced what little I could through half-hidden apps. Each trail led to dead ends, burner phones, false names, empty shells. Whoever she was tied to, they were careful, professional. But the universe, in its cruelty, threw me a bone. One rainy afternoon, she left her laptop open while showering. The screen glowed with an encrypted messenger window. I couldn't make sense of most of it, strings of numbers and symbols, but one message stood out. Delivery must happen by end of month. The painting contains the access key. The painting. I hadn't thought about it in weeks. The old canvas of the riverbank she had painted for me, the one I had loved. I pulled it out from the closet where it leaned, harmless, against the wall. But as I ran my fingers across the strokes, I noticed faint impressions beneath the paint, almost like another layer hidden under the visible image. My pulse raced. Could the painting itself be part of this puzzle? That evening I tested her. "You know," I said casually, "I've been thinking of selling your painting. It's beautiful and people might pay well for it." Her reaction was instant. She froze mid-step, her eyes widening before she forced a laugh. "Don't be silly. It's just a painting. Why would you sell something I made for you?" But her voice was too sharp, her smile too brittle. And in that crack I saw confirmation. The painting wasn't a gift, it was a container. I couldn't sleep that night. I stared at her silhouette in the dark, questions burning in my mind. Who was she really working for? What did the painting hold? And why me? The answer came in the cruelest way. A week later, while she was out meeting a friend, I finally peeled back a corner of the canvas. Behind the painted riverbank lay a thin sheet of coating etched onto material I didn't recognize. Numbers, symbols, a digital lattice. It looked like nothing I had ever seen, like a key to something vast and dangerous. And in that moment, everything collapsed. Claire hadn't stumbled into my life. She had been sent. The laughter, the kisses, the whispered promises, they were all scaffolding, built to keep me steady until she got what she wanted. Yet here's the strangest part. I didn't feel rage. Not immediately. What I felt was loss. As if the woman I had loved had died and in her place stood only a mask, worn by someone I could never truly know. When she returned that night, wet with rain, smiling as though she were mine, I couldn't look at her the same. My heart cracked each time she touched me, but my resolve hardened. I couldn't let her win. So I smiled, kissed her forehead, and hid the peeled canvas beneath the bed. I had decided, if she was playing a game, then so was I. The night of reckoning came quietly, without thunder or storms. Sometimes life doesn't give you a dramatic warning. It just folds in on itself, leaving you with choices you never wanted to make. Claire had been restless for days. She moved through the apartment like a stranger, wearing her skin, checking her phone every hour, vanishing for errands that had no names. I knew something was coming, and when she told me she'd be out late for a work dinner, I made my decision. The painting was already hidden in the trunk of my car. I'd wrapped it in plastic, placed it beneath a blanket, and locked it tight. That night, as I sat alone in the living room, I didn't drink, didn't turn on the TV. I just waited. It was after midnight when she returned. I heard the key slip into the lock, the cautious creak of the door. She entered quietly as if expecting me to be asleep, but when she saw me sitting there in the dark, her smile faltered. "You're awake," she said softly, setting down her purse. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. My voice sounded foreign to me, steady and cold. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she crossed the room, her steps deliberate, her eyes fixed on mine. "You've been distant," she murmured, sliding her hands onto my shoulders. "Is something wrong?" I wanted to scream the truth, that I knew about the folder, the messages, the coded canvas, that she had turned my life into a stage and me into a fool. But I only said, "I've just been thinking." She tilted her head, searching my face. "About us?" "Yes," I whispered, "about us." Her fingers tightened just slightly. That tiny gesture told me she was bracing herself for a lie or for a revelation. I'll never know. But I realized then that no answer she gave would matter. The woman I loved was gone, if she had ever existed at all. I stood, letting her hands fall away. "Where were you tonight?" She blinked, feigning confusion. "I told you, work dinner." I almost laughed. Instead, I walked past her toward the door. "It's over, Claire." Her voice sharpened. "What do you mean?" I turned back, and for the first time I saw not a lover, not even an enemy, but a stranger. "Whatever this was, this game, this mission, you don't get what you came for, not from me." Her mask cracked then, just for a moment, enough for me to glimpse the steel beneath. "Where is it?" she asked, her voice low. The question confirmed everything. I didn't answer, I simply left. The air outside was bitter cold as I slid into the car and started the engine. The painting thudded softly in the trunk, as if it knew it was the center of this storm. I drove aimlessly, streetlights blurring past, my chest heavy with both victory and grief. By dawn, I reached the riverbank, the same one she had painted, the one that had once felt like ours. I carried the painting to the water's edge, unwrapped it, and stared at the river shimmering with early light. It was beautiful, and yet it was poison. Without ceremony, I hurled it into the current. The canvas hit the water with a muted splash, then bobbed, then slowly sank. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw her face in the ripples, half smile, half sorrow. Then it was gone. I don't know who Claire truly worked for. I don't know what power that painting carried or what door it might have unlocked. But I know this, she didn't get it, and she never will. As for me, I carry the weight of what we had, or what I thought we had. Love and betrayal twisted together so tightly I can no longer tell them apart. Sometimes I wonder if I destroyed a part of myself when I let the river swallow that canvas. But at least I'm free. Or maybe freedom is just another illusion.